so that you don't have to look at it first.
Right.
Heidi-ho.
Hello.
Can you hear us all right there?
We can't
We
hear
can't
you.
hear you.
We can see your mouse moving, but we can't hear you.
Yeah. Nope. All right, let's see if we can figure out this.
Can you get out of here?
It should be coming out of this thing, actually. I was gonna
Oh,
say,
yeah, we're on the big screen.
yeah, I'm gonna figure out our, like, that paper's kind of old, but a lot of the details are still relevant. I don't know. You know what I have? I have a USB. I think I got it. Oh, you know what it is? I think I put him on mute.
Yep.
All right, Jeff, try talking again.
Hey, is that better?
Yeah, dude, I had set it on mute when joined by default, so.
Nice. That's good stuff. Yeah, I'm hiding in the back room right now because I haven't put together a presentation yet. So.
Yeah, I've got an outline, but I didn't make slides, unfortunately.
Good enough.
Is it? Is it though? All right, now we should be able to roll this back a little bit. It's still in progress.
In August, we're moving to South Korea, where Alex is going to start a professorship for the American University there. Yeah. Yeah. I recently got a job just full-time remote engineer, and so we need someone to sort of park while I got going in my job. Hello.
I know.
I'm sorry.
But-
Okay, I'm not in charge either. Nice to meet you. Not impressed. I love your glasses. Oh, thank you. Yeah, those are awesome. Thank you. Different Andrea. Hello. Hi. Oh, I'm sorry. There's other people here besides me. I was like, your glasses are cool. Here. I think Conroy just went downstairs to let someone in. Which I think it was you, but apparently not. Yeah, we got it.
Grab a seat.
We pulled the chair. There are cold drinks in the fridge and hot drinks next to the fridge. Apparently there's pizza on the way. Pizza? Yeah, I do like pizza. Yeah. It's great. Just putting a little fire in here. How long is this one tonight? I don't remember. Not sure.
That's till 9:30.
How long
the event thing.
How long is this unmeeting?
Yeah.
They call it the unconference. Right?
Yeah, I have no idea.
No worries. Oh, I thought that was a joke, I had no idea.
No.
Oh, I didn't leave voicemail, I don't like voicemail either.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
I was like, oh crap, the domino's got my phone. Sorry to answer this call. I've got like 2 missed calls.
You're like, oh, no. Oh, yeah. My number's on the door. Oh, Anna Vera. Wait, what am I saying?
Hey, Conroy, are you cool going first, man?
What's that?
Is Conroy cool going first?
Sure.
Cool.
And then help you on selling for some pizza.
I don't know what.
Conroy, do you have an actual title for your presentation?
No.
Okay, I'm making one up for you.
All right. When do we actually start? Like 7?
Yeah.
All right.
Or, yeah. Oh, that was in March. Oh, that's. I was looking at. Anyway.
So how often are these meetings?
They're periodical.
Okay, so when someone decides to schedule one?
Yeah, we used to have them like weekly, and then like 2 weeks, and then every month. Like people stop coming in as regularly, so now it's more like, okay, when we get enough interest and enough topics, then we'll do
Yeah.
something. Yeah. All right, let me see.
Testing.
Okay, I'm gonna unplug this for a minute, but our video is still on, and I'll mute us.
I saw your star, so I was like, oh, heck yeah.
Hello. Hello.
Hey, what's up, Arsh?
Awesome. This works. Sweet. I'll just mute myself then.
Cool.
No,
I'm gonna go get plugged into the Apple TV and stuff. I'm gonna mute myself as well, and then yeah, should be going soon. Can you guys get the Facebook live stream going too?
Yep. Working on it right now.
Cool. Oh, nice. I could see my face on your projector through the.
Oh, yeah.
That's neat. What's up, guys?
Pretty well. Long time to see. Yeah, so you went right through it.
Hey, can you guys all hear from this mic okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool. All right, guys, we are almost ready to get started. I'm trying to herd cats over here, but just another second. Hey, there were some people over here that wanted to know where Juneau's beer was.
They're looking too serious.
I think there are
Forgot to tell us.
some people here that are thinking the same thing.
All right, we got people making their way over.
And this, all this?
All right, welcome guys to the April 17th Dev Alliance meeting. Stoked to have everybody here. How's Fairbanks doing? Can we get a shout out or something? How many people are in Fairbanks?
3.
3. All right, we'll take it. We'll take it. How many people do we have in Juneau this time? Nobody's in Juneau.
At least Conroy, hopefully.
All right, we got like at least 3 times as many hands as last time. Okay, I'll do the quick math. It looks like we got 6, which is 3x. That's a 300% increase over last meeting. Solid Juneau. I haven't taken a head count here, but we got a lot of people eating chili, and that's pretty sweet. We got some delicious cornbread. So I'm doing some quick announcements to get everybody up to speed. You asked, I delivered. I put SSL on the AK Dev Alliance website. Yeah! Also, happy Cake Day, Dev Alliance. We, as of this month, have made it 1 year. Our membership is crushing it. We've now got 3 spots, and that's awesome. I'm really excited for that. So 1 year, high fives to yourself and or clapping or whatever you like to do. Thanks for sticking this out. We're almost over the hump. If we make it to 15 months, we're like doing better than any group in the last 8 years. So our schedule today, Conroy Whitney is going to be starting us off, giving a presentation on launching a remote dev career via Upwork. And then we're going to switch over, and Arsh from Fairbanks is going to give an intro to DevOps, followed by Lee and Lucas on building an enterprise SaaS application in 2 weeks. So without any further ado, Conroy, are you ready to go?
Yes. Let me, is that still up there? I'll start my video again. Cool. I'm going to stop sharing your screen and share mine. Perfect. Close that. Move Zoom. And full screen. No, not full screen. What do I want? Format. View. Present. Okay. Y'all can hear me okay? You still there?
Yes.
Yep, we're here.
Cool.
We can hear you.
All right. Awesome. Well, hi, everybody. So I'm Conroy. I live in Juneau. I have a company called Tandem Labs, which is completely through Upwork, which is a remote kind of freelance website. And then I also started the Juneau co-working space here, which is where we are right now. So first off, like I said, what is Upwork? It's actually a conglomeration of like a couple of sites like Elance and freelancer.com. And they just kept buying up all these sites. And now it's like the only site where you do freelancing or remote work. So they kind of have a monopoly, but at the same time, there's a ton of jobs on there. It's very well known. So a lot of the hires are on there looking for people. So it's a pretty active marketplace. The cons and pros. So I'm going to start with cons first because they're usually most people's objections. The biggest one is that Upwork takes a pretty hefty commission. So the breakdown is 20% on your first $500. So if you're just doing like little one-off, $300, $400 clients, they're going to take 20% of that every time. 10% on the first $10,000, right? So if you have a project that's like, $5,000, they're going to take 500 of it. And then after $10,000, it's 5%. So if you had a $15,000 client, you're going to be paying like $1,300. A lot of people think that's pretty steep, but I consider it a commission. Actually, on my taxes this year, I actually wrote it as commission fee. They are getting me clients. They are, my source of leads. So for me, it's worth it. They're pretty strict. So there are legal ramifications. If you go off platform, they can sue you and like take a bunch of your money back and stuff like that. So once you're on, you're kind of stuck. So if you meet somebody that you want to have a long-term relationship with, that can be kind of a problem. And you can be putting all your eggs in one basket. So, if you get one client that gives you a really terrible review, that could haunt you for a while and make it harder to get clients in the future. And then last but not least on the cons is there's global competition. So you are competing against people in South America or Eastern Europe or Asia who are doing the same things that you say that you can do, but for a half, a third, a quarter of the price. That's not always a bad thing. There's a strong preference for US-based freelancers, but that is something to keep in mind, is that can drive like downward price pressure. But for the pros, so again, that strong bias for US workers, guaranteed payment. No more of this, the check is in the mail stuff. I can't tell you how many times I work with clients that they're like, oh, no, yeah, the check's in the mail, the check's in the mail. They say that for like a week. And you get the mail, it's been sent overnight priority and it was signed yesterday. You're like, yeah, the check was in the mail the whole time you're saying that. With Upwork, when you do hourly, it keeps track of your hours. They have like 2 days to review them, and then it automatically pulls it from their bank account or credit card or whatever. So you get paid regularly on schedule. Same with a milestone. Like if you set up, there's two different forms, and we'll talk about that later. But if you set up a milestone and you deliver it, they've got a week to kind of make a dispute and say, no, this isn't what we delivered, and it automatically deducts it from them. So when you do the work, you get paid for the work, and Upwork is there to help make sure you get paid for the work. That's a huge thing in my opinion. Arbitration in case of dispute. So again, if you submit this milestone and the person is not paying it and they dispute it, Upwork comes in and said, okay, what work did you guys say that you're going to do? What work was actually done? We're going to decide in this case to favor the developer. They actually did the work, even if the client's being irrational, and you still get paid. So you don't go to legal court battle. You don't have to go to small claims court. Upwork takes care of that for you. Again, that's pretty big. If you've ever done freelancing, you get a bunch of 1099 miscellaneous income statements that you have to file as taxes. I think last year I had like 4 or 5 of them, and you have to wait and you wait and you wait for these people to send these to you before you can do your taxes. And some of them don't send them to you until April 3rd. Thank you very much. Yes, that was this year. So with Upwork, they consolidate all that. They actually don't even send you a 1099 unless you do like a ridiculous number of small transactions. But it also means that you don't have a bunch of 1099s from a bunch of employees either. Or employers. Yeah, all your income is from Upwork. It's pretty nice for tax purposes. So also on tax purposes, real quick, if you haven't ever done freelancing, you aren't getting a W-2. You're doing contract work, 1099. Yeah, which means that you are now self-employed, which means that you file a Schedule C, which means that a ton of stuff is deductible. So if you buy a new laptop, deductible. If you have a home office, deductible. Talk to your tax attorney. I'm not giving tax advice. If you software subscriptions that you pay for, there's a ton of stuff that can lower your tax, I forget the word for it, burden, no, not burden, liability. So it's pretty nice. That's definitely a pro. but that's with any freelancing, not just with Upwork. Huge pro of Upwork is the built-in marketing, your profile, your website, your client acquisition. So there are people actively out there every day looking for people with your skill set. And if you have a good profile and you have good feedback and reviews, you will be amongst the first to be contacted. So I'll go into this in the next thing in the getting started, but once you get established, that's a big plus. It is harder to get established, but once you do, it's kind of like this recurring lead generation source. Global reach, right? So if you're only dealing with people in Fairbanks or people in Anchorage or people in Juneau, that's a pretty small market. Sometimes you can do like friend of a friend sort of thing. Like, yeah, my friend wants to build this app. Okay, cool. But through Upwork, you have like legitimate companies, and I've worked with people in LA and Austin and New York and Pennsylvania and Italy who, you know, they've made this decision that they're going to go and they're actually going to do this thing. It's not just kind of like, again, this personal relationship, who knows who thing. You can actually reach these companies. Which in that same sense, so digital nomad, because you're not tied to a local market, you can go anywhere and do your job from anywhere. So I started freelancing when I lived in Hatcher's Pass, and then I lived in Big Lake, and then I moved here to Juneau. So like it wasn't tied to geography. And I saved the best for last. So you get to work with clients that you love. So you define your niche, right? You say that this is what I do. I think a big mistake is when you're saying, I'm a programmer, I can do anything. That's not very competitive. If my profile, I can show this later if we have time, but mine is like, I do Rails and React. I help startups build their MVPs. So I don't work with people who have established products, and I don't work with people who want to build a tool just for themselves. I work specifically with individuals and small businesses who want to build their MVPs. And my profile very much helps weed out all the other people, which means that by the time I get a message, it's already a good fit. And if I don't like their personality, I can move on to the next person. So at the end of the day, it's not like, it goes from that scarcity mindset to the abundance mindset of, I know that if I just wait a little bit longer, there'll be a good match out there, and I don't have to be worried that if I turn down this total jerk or this person who doesn't seem like a good fit, that's my last opportunity. And sometimes it can feel like that if you're trying to hunt down these leads in a local market. Cool. So getting started is kind of a catch-22. So clients hire people with experience, and it's hard to get experience if you never get hired. So chicken and the egg, bootstrapping problem. Some of the solutions are to just do crap jobs for a while. And I did that. And I have a graph later, again, if we have time, that shows like the number of clients that I did and the amount per client. I had like, you know, 5 or 6 clients in a quarter at like a couple $100 to $1,000 each. And it was like such a grind. And then by, you know, this last quarter, I had one client that was a lot larger. And that's kind of part of me figuring out who I wanted to work with, but it's also me building that profile. So you can do the crap jobs for a while, or you can run existing clients through Upwork. So if you already are doing freelancing and you want to transition into remote, you could say, okay, from now on, I want you to pay me through Upwork, and I want, you know, when we're done with this current project, then you give me a review. And what that does is it builds, it shows how much money you earned, it shows how many hours you worked, and it gives you projects and feedback reviews on there, 5-star reviews or whatever. So that's what employers are filtering by. So they might say, I only want to work with people who have over 100 hours. Well, that's kind of hard to do, right? It takes a while to get to that. Or people that have made more than $10,000, or people who have, you know, 4.5 stars or more. And this is what we do when we go on Amazon, right? We're just so used to being able to filter things by the best, and, you know, there's still results there. So you just want to make sure that you're in those results. Last but not least, you can join an existing agency. So I'll talk about this later. There's 2 different ways that you can sell yourself, either as a freelancer or as an agency. I started as a freelancer. I ended up creating an agency where I am the sole employee of that agency. But what it means is that you can, if you join an existing agency, they can assign work to you, and then you're doing the work through the agency and getting paid through the agency, but you're getting reviews on your profile. So that means that if you work for them for a little while, you could spin off and do your own thing independent of them and set your own prices and stuff like that. But for the time being, you are building that history and that profile. And last but not least, on the bright side, So once you get going, you're pretty golden, right? So as long as you don't screw things up too badly, like my earlier comment with a bad client and things go south, as long as you don't do that, you should be pretty good. So selling yourself. You can sell yourself as a freelancer. So you're a business of one, regular 1099 independent contractor. A lot of times you're joining an existing team and you are, maybe you're a supplemental programmer, or maybe they're just farming out some piece of work that somebody else inside their team doesn't want to do or can't do, right? Sometimes they get, like an agency, a real life agency will get a job for a language that they don't have anybody in. They're like, well, I don't want to turn down the money, so I'm just going to go find somebody, and you would be that somebody. It happens all the time in large cities too, but in this case, it'd be remote. So you have to wear all the hats, right? So you are sales, you are marketing, you are project management, right? So your marketing is your profile. That's how you're selling yourself. And you are sales when you do interviewing and you're like trying to convince them to work with you, that's sales. And then during the project, you may or may not have your own project manager, but you have to keep things going, right? So you're like you wear all the hats, you're a team of one, and you receive all the ratings on your own. Or on the agency route, so I don't know why that says acceptance, I'm sorry, that should say agency. You can work with other coworkers. So if you have a designer or a project manager or somebody else, if you already have a team of people that you like to work with, you could create an agency and build that as a brand. And Upwork has a lot of good promo videos of people that have done that. And, it's a really nice PR for them, but it actually is a thing that people do, and it's pretty cool. And you distribute the work around the group, and you can either choose to get all the ratings as the group, as the agency, or distribute them based on who did that work. And the client preferences it depends, right? So people who just want a programmer, quote unquote, just a programmer. I had the dude tell me that, he's like, you're a programmer, right? I was like, well, yeah. He's like, well, then just make this. And I'm like, goodbye. And then sometimes people want a long-term partner, right? And then in that case, they would want an agency. So they know that even if this programmer goes off to do something else, there's this concept, this entity that's going to be more, have more longevity. So I forget how we're doing on time. I know it's 7:23. I forgot what time I started, but finding a job. So there's two really ways that you can do it. You can do job searches and do a bunch of proposal applications, or you can receive an interview request. And you can guess which one you'd rather do. So if you are sending out a bunch of applications, you are one of 100 people who are applying to a given job. There is no context, right? You're just a random application. It's one-sided interest. They don't know who you are. They don't know why they should care. And you're writing this like really formal cover letter. And I'll show you some, again, if we have time at the end, of mine from the early days, and they're cringeworthy. It's like, dear sir or madam, like that sort of thing. You're like, it's pretty bad. And then there's a bunch of like these interview questions, like they might say, okay, describe a project where you did something similar, and you write another paragraph. And they're like, describe why do you want to work on this specific project, and you write another paragraph. And you do this, and I used to send out like 20 proposals like a day for like a week before I would get a job, and it was so terrible. Versus receiving an interview request. So in that sense, you are one of 5, right? They might have done a search for people with your skill set who have your experience, and there might have been 5 of you, and they might say, hey, your profile looks like we'd be a good match. Let me know if you're interested. And they do that to 5 people. So now you have, a 20 times better chance than you had before. There's shared context, there's shared interest. And when you casually reply like, hey, thanks for messaging. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. Let's set up a time to talk. That's like, now you're having a conversation. It's not this formal application process. So again, this goes back to the catch-22. In the beginning, you have to find and apply to a bunch of stuff, and it's just kind of a numbers game. But once you've established a niche and a profile, then when you turn on your profile and say, I'm ready to do some work because I have, some bandwidth or whatever, if all has gone well, then you actually receive some interviewers. So I guess the point of this is it gets better, right? So yeah, that's the takeaway. Jeff, what is my cutoff time? Because I don't want to go over. Maybe you can slack it. I'll keep going. So
Got like I don't know, 2 or 3 more minutes. That's probably solid. Does that work?
cool, man.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll keep it short on this other stuff. I'm actually doing a workshop here in Juneau a week from today on this, so this is helpful to know kind of what content, and I'd love some feedback. So the Lifecycle, so the interview process, the main thing there is make sure you have a video camera, make sure that you're dressed professionally. Honestly, I've done hiring through here for subcontractors, and the bar is pretty low. Like if you show up and you're a regular human who looks like a regular human and talks like a regular human, and you actually can do the stuff on your profile, you're probably going to get the job. And honestly, there's just a bunch of spam out there. So basically just be professional. And that goes for the proposal as well. Like send an actual PDF with nice looking headers and stuff. And it doesn't have to be crazy, but you're just putting yourself just a little bit above the norm. Going through here, so like I said, there's two ways to get paid. Hourly, you actually use their time tracker, which takes screenshots of your screen. And a lot of people are like, that's too invasive, I don't like that. Well, it reminds me, actually, I see like this flash, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm working. I'm not Facebooking, I'm not Slacking, I'm in work mode. And honestly, I get a lot more done. And it makes me feel like when I submit those hours, because you don't actually have to enter them in the time tracker, they just get submitted automatically, I can feel good and know like I'm getting paid for the work I did. Versus milestones, I've switched to milestones. People say that if you are doing something that's new, charge hourly, right? Because then you're kind of learning, or if the scope isn't well defined. But if you're doing something that you've done 100 times, do it milestone based, because, or fixed cost, because then you're getting to capture that efficiency that you've built in, just based on, you know, the fact that you've done it so many times. Tools. So Zoom, get the professional, because it's the stupidest thing in the world when an interview cuts off at 40 minutes. Also, you can do cloud recording. So in addition to, you know, whatever stuff you've had with your clients and back and forth, you can always go back and reference a recording if you need to. Calendly is a way to book appointments. So none of this like, hey, I'm free from 2 to 4, and then from 3, you know, and like you're throwing out these random numbers. Don't do it. Just send them a link. They find the best time that's best for you based on your already booked calendar. And then it's set. And it actually integrates with Zoom, which is pretty nice. So then it'll send them an email with, here's our Zoom link, and it sets up the recording. And like, it took me a while to get this all configured, but if you're interested, I can help. But it's a pretty sweet system. PandaDoc is just for creating proposals. It's just a random tool. You can find a lot of other tools. And Trello, again, just a random project management. But these are tools that I use on like every day when I work with my clients, because it's all about communication, right? I should put Slack on here. I always invite them. I have my own personal Slack for my business, and then I have private channels that I invite each client to, and we can just talk away in there. So again, just all about communication. I won't get into the personal examples. Again, I don't know why it says hourly versus milestones, but if you're interested, I can give you actual examples of my earnings and like the struggle in there, or my cover letters that are so cringeworthy. But for all intents and purposes, I'll cut this off now. And thanks for listening. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions. I'd love to help. I love what I do. I love who I work with. I love the fact that it's remote. I love everything about it. So I'd also love to help somebody get
what I do. Take it to my needs.
So you can have, this is for the group anyway. Anything left over. Okay, it'll work.
How do I change this? All displays.
Anybody have any questions on this side? You want to add anything? Either way, it's going to be enjoyable.
Yep. Me too. Oh damn. If I do that, that happens, huh? Actually, why am I doing that again? Ah, that's how we did it.
So this is off now, right? Sure. It's on. All right. So we fixed the ring. Should have.
Okay, Fairbanks, let us know when you guys are up and running.
Oh yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
All right, let me figure out how to present a screen on Zoom. Hold on, I haven't really used this. Oh, share, there you go. Can I just share my whole screen? Right, there's gonna be some weird inception here as I figure out stuff. Sweet. Do you guys see my screen? Man, you guys are seeing my Facebook, aren't you? That's better. How do I get rid of this? Just imagine that doesn't exist. Wow, that is. All right, so yeah, so I'm Arsh. I'm going to do a quick 10-ish minutes thing on DevOps. I don't know how much I was sort of focusing this more on the Fairbanks group, but they didn't show up. Do people actually know what DevOps is, or should I just like go over that, or just skip that part altogether?
I'm gonna give it 1 minute.
Hey, Arsh, could you give a 1-minute intro?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
All right, so if I can pull this up real quick. So yeah.
Start from the basics, Arsh. I've never done any DevOps.
All right. Watch me struggle using all the technology. So yeah, I'm presenting from my machine, like watching the stream to make sure it doesn't break. So I have all these different screens. All right, so real quick, DevOps. If I can get the machine, if I can get this to work, come on. All right, so basically it's super easy. It's DevOps is it's development and operations. And the main idea, and just let me know if you can't hear me, I don't use this room much. The main idea is the developers are also managing the system. And what that does actually is it helps break down those silos where the developer has to talk to the sysadmins or the people managing the system or people deploying. And that basically makes for these really small, quick, and hopefully stable releases. So again, it goes through the whole agile methodology of getting stuff out there quick and being able to change stuff. Like I said, super easy goals. You make faster, smaller, more stable releases. And you try not to fail, but if you fail, you sort of recover quickly. And yeah, so how is basically test-driven development. Based on my experience, based on what I've read, seen, you can't really do DevOps if you aren't doing testing, because that sort of like breaks down the whole, how do you know when it fails sort of scenario. CI, CD, continuous integration, deployment is another aspect of this. And the ops part, what I have experience in is configuration management. And depending on how much time I have, I've got on a spiel about Chef because apparently the development community doesn't like it, but I think it's pretty cool. All right, so the bulk of this presentation is basically going to be this contrived example that I literally wrote up in an hour, potentially this afternoon. So it's this super awesome application that does kitty stuff. So kitty as in like cats, right? So, all right. So what do cats do? Well, they purr. They maybe let their owner sleep. They love scratching their owners, and they have some level of happiness, which depending on the happiness, they either let you sleep or they scratch you. Right. All right. So what is the first thing you need for DevOps, right? You sort of need this test-driven development mindset strategy. So you write some tests, right? And you run your tests. So you run your tests. Well, they failed, right? All right. I definitely don't want to publish this. So you go in, you figure out what's failing. And just for this example, so you go in, you're like, all right, what's failing? Well, it looks like my scratch owner function, there's something wrong in that. Here, let me make that more obvious. Like right there, right? My function that decides whether my cat scratches me or not is wrong. Right? What is happening? Well, the function says your cat always scratches you, which if you have ever had a cat is sort of true, but you know what? We don't like that cat. So just because I hate coding life, I just did this. I actually like made sure the function ran before I embarrass myself in front of people across the state. And so, right, so the cat only scratches you if it's super unhappy. So you're like, all right, I think I fixed this. Let's see if it works. Sweet. You see that little OK, and it says it passes all your tests. Awesome. So you have done your test-driven development. You know everything works. You know when the cat scratches you. You know when the cat lets you sleep. You know when the cat purrs. Now you're like, all right, I want to deploy this, right? So the other thing I didn't mention is when I sort of think CI/CD, continuous integration development, I sort of assume you have source control, and apparently my department wasn't happy with that when I said that on the comps, but anyways, they get you think whatever they get you think. So everything's passing, and now I'm like, all right, I want to go ahead and push my changes. So I go ahead, I push my changes to your source control, Git, SVN, CVS, whatever you guys use. And now's the cool part. So we have done a testing. We have verified everything works. We have pushed to Git. Now comes the CI/CD part of this. So it's gonna so basically with continuous integration and deployment, every time you push to your repo, to your source control, you want to run all of your tests, right? So there are a lot of tools out there that do this. Actually, before I do this, I did the same thing I do at work. I commit, but I don't push, which doesn't, run my CI/CD. I still need to set up SSH on this machine. Man. Anyways, once I can remember my password. So once you push it, you notice when I was testing this out, every commit. So the last commit I made was purposely so it fails. So this was a commit that you guys saw with basically the same thing happened. Is it failed the scratch. It failed the scratch owner test. The same thing you guys saw when I ran it locally at the beginning of the presentation. So let's see if we can push. All right. One more chance, guys. I swear I know my passwords. Oh, no. But that's not going to work. All right. Anyways, so basically with CI/CD, every time you push, if you can remember the password to your source control, it goes in and runs tests. And you can actually see that. So, I have a bunch of pushes to this repo. There's stuff where it failed. There's stuff where it passed. So going to the more exciting thing. So this system here is called Circle CI. I was initially going to use AppWare, but I found out that AppWare is actually paid and doesn't do anything free. And the account I was going to use was through work. So I was like, I should probably use something you guys can use also. So that's Circle CI. I don't know how much experience people have, but with a lot of these platforms, they're all based on YAML files. So if you don't like YAML files, well, you should like them. And they generally have super easy setup instructions to get them running super quick. So like for Circle CI, you have to, for some reason in your repo, you have to have a .circleci directory. And then underneath that, you have to have your config.yaml. Every other system I've used, like AppWare or Travis, they just require like a .appware.yaml or .travis.yaml. I don't know why Circle does it differently, but that's just how they do it. So a lot of the files are similar. The first thing you have to set up always is where you want to build the image. So basically the way this works is it goes out to your cloud, it pulls your stuff down, it spins up a VM somewhere, and it runs your code. So for this project, I'm just using Docker and a particular image from Circle CI with Python 3.7 installed because that's what I use. So the entire build, right? So Docker, and that's just stuff you pull up from the documentation. For Circle CI, every time you go in and add a project, they give you like this bare bones file that you can super easily, like within 5 minutes, you can get up and running. So yeah, so it's super easy. So you set up your build platform, whatever it is, it's Docker in this case, and then you sort of do your steps. So the first step you want to do is your checkout. So this is where you can configure stuff that happens when your repo is checked out. But by default, if I go into my test, it does this. It actually shows you what it's doing with the checkout, and it's this bash script. It's just going in. It adds an SSH key into your repo, gives SSH key, pull permissions, that kind of stuff. Basically sets up SSH like I should have, so that I could actually push. Makes your directories, all that stuff. So this is by default. You don't have to set up any of the script. This is the default stuff Circle does. And once it's done doing that, it goes in and it runs your tests, which is in the run section. And then within the run, you can have multiple different runs. So you can have like different test suites, for example, and then like a name and the command. So the command is just bash, and you can have multi-line stuff. So it's super easy. I'm going to stop in case anyone has any questions on anything I've talked about, apart from why I can't remember my passwords. So anyways, the point of this talk was it's super easy to do something like this. Like I said, if you just follow the default stuff on Circle, it took me like 5 minutes to get up and running. Once I figured out my indentation on my YAML files, so most of the issue is just programmer error, right? So that's cool and all. Jeff, how am I doing on time? All right, I'm going to keep going until Jeff comes back to me on that. So this is all great.
Good. How much more time you want?
Like 3 minutes.
3 to 5? 3 to 5.
Awesome. So this is sort of like a contrived example, right? So since it is a development talk, I have to do the sort of obligatory XKCD and tell a story behind it. So when you're doing DevOps, this still works. You can actually goof off at work, and you can legit say your code is compiling, but you can just, it's more like, oh, I'm running my tests, or in my case, So, anyways, where I got interested in all of this, since I have 3-ish minutes left, is from work. If guys haven't done anything, we use Chef at work to actually configure servers. So yeah, so basically every time we push to this repo, it goes through, it runs its test. This is actually a little more complicated than what I did. So, and this is also sort of cool because remember how I was talking about how you could use different providers? So what this system does is, so AppWare, so we are developing for Chef for CentOS, but AppWare actually only does Ubuntu machines on its testing platform. So again, pulling up AppWare YAML just to show you guys how sort of similar it is. It's all YAML files. You have to install, which happens before your tests run. But after your repo is cloned, you can do stuff like skip branches that have a PR, so it doesn't like spin up extra tests. And then you can have multiple commands in your test script. You can run your linter, you can run your tests, multiple linters, that sort of stuff. So, but the cool thing I want to talk about is how you can do like sort of this chaining of build environments. Is since AppWare only has Ubuntu and we want to test it on CentOS, we can actually say my test script is literally you start an Ubuntu machine and then you run your tests on an AWS instance. So what that command goes and does is it spins up an EC2 instance, tries to convert that instance to my cookbook, runs all of my tests, and if all of that goes good, the test passes, and my build can be cloned. So yeah, I guess I sort of find this cool because you're like building, you start building in this Google compute engine that AppWare owns, and then you sort of like go and transition over to Amazon on an account you own, and then like they just magically talk to each other because the cloud is awesome. But yeah, that's it from me. If guys are interested in that repo, it is not this one, that's work. But if you guys are interested in that repo, it's on GitHub. It's nothing that great. GitHub.com/Arsh25, and you should be able to find that there. So yeah, any questions or anything?
Yeah, we have one question.
Yeah.
So I hear that developers are herding cats is like herding developers. I was curious, do you have any successful strategies on how you deal with running unit tests and external dependencies? What have you found to be successful, AKA working with a MySQL database or Redis as some sort of service dependency?
So is this in terms of like making sure the service is up, making sure the service is behaving like it should, or?
In the case of scratching cats, at some point the cat will repeatedly scratch you, so you might as well just cache that a key value store like memcache.
Right.
So you would, at that point, you'd be introducing memcache as a dependency. I'm just curious, how do you deal with the functions you're testing integrated with external service dependencies, whether it be a MySQL database or Redis or memcache?
So what I've been told about test-driven development is you only worry about the code you write. So your job is not to test memcache. Your job is not to test MySQL. It's the developers who develop that system to test their stuff, right? So so if you have a function that sets, for example, a memcache key, and you could test that function, be like set key foo to have value bar, and then you could retrieve key foo and make sure it has value bar, right? But I don't think it's our job as someone who's using that system to make sure the developers of that system did their job, and yeah. Like the black box, right? It goes into a black box, magic happens, stuff comes out. I don't know if that answered your question at all, but.
Thank you. Yes, it did. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks, Arsh.
Awesome. I'm going.
Who's next?
I guess we're up. Let's adjust this audio. So before we get started on our presentation, we just wanted to give some community shout outs. So the first one, so obviously for a while, there's been software engineers in Alaska, probably way longer than I've been alive. But anyways, this kind of been a pivotal moment here recently with some software engineers. So traditionally, there's been these companies that have been up here, and it's hard to find talent, and that's one of the reasons why the Alaska Dev Alliance is here to bring us all together and help provide education and hopefully grow the community and the job opportunities that are up here. And with that, because it has been a challenge, some companies have been finding talent elsewhere. And so we kind of hit this inflection point recently, which is where Keith, this is right here, with QuickCup, hired a local software engineer to start growing his team. And we just wanted to celebrate this moment because it's actually a really awesome moment for all of us. And in doing so, we got a memento for Bradley here, who is the first software engineer to be hired by a local tech startup. And if it's not true, we just said it was true. It is now true. And so we got a little present for Bradley here. And so this is a memento. And hopefully as we get more of these experiences and our community continues to grow, this memento will be passed on to other engineers that help create lots of strategic value in the startups that are Alaska born. And so let me go grab it.
Here, Bradley. Here we go. Life jacket. There we go. And it says celebrating tech in Alaska at strategic value. So, thanks to Bradley and Keith for believing in Bradley, and hopefully we can continue to build this community together.
And I should say, like, Jay as well, like, we've done this together, so, yeah, thank you.
Air high five to Jay, so.
And then we have one more. Yeah. There's also another thing I want to give a shout out for, which is that the University of Alaska in general just like does not get enough credit. Like years and years ago, it merged with the community college, and it really like changed how people perceive the university. But there are some really awesome programs there: management information systems, nursing, computer science. And so there's actually somebody here from the computer science department, or a computer science student tonight, who I want to give a shout out to. So Hannah, come on down.
Yeah.
I met Hannah like a month or two ago at an engineering career fair, and she says, yeah, I am majoring in physics and computer science, and I'm really interested in aerospace. And then I bumped into her a couple of weeks ago, and she says, yeah, I got an internship at NASA. So yeah, blast off. We got you some swag to bring with you to wear on your way. So here you go. Okay, so, also, yeah, we do have one other piece, which is that we got you a chair so that you can watch the rockets launch.
Fred Meyer special.
All right, one more round of applause for UAA. All right, so next up, if you need some, grab some coffee, I'll start a pot. I know we're running late, but Lee and Lucas are gonna jump in and talk about building a SaaS company in 2 weeks. So here we go.
Yeah, you should probably grab some coffee real quick. We got like 30 slides.
We kind of went overboard today. Oh, we cut it down to 26. Hey, Conroy, can you switch to our screen presenting, or do we just need to hit share?
I think you can just hit share. I don't think I'm controlling anything. But... Cool.
Maybe go to the next screen over. How do I do it with this? Oh, it's the menu in the way. All right, there we go. Cool. Can everybody see this, especially in Juneau and Fairbanks? Oh, yeah. Can you? There we go. Cool. So I'm Lucas. This is Lee. You got to come on this way so you can speak into the mic. Yeah. So my brother and I, I specifically have been working with Jeff on a project called Legalverse. My main focus in the last 6 months has been taking a bunch of code and trying to create a repeatable pattern. One of the things I realized at a previous company is that we go out and we come up with, the sales guys and marketing guys, like, we need this new feature or service. And then we have to go do it, and we have to build everything from scratch again. And which is fine if you don't have a big infrastructure, but as soon as you start scaling your engineering team, as soon as you start scaling the number of clients you're working with, every system becomes more complicated. And so repeatable patterns is a huge part of trying to do these things really fast. And then the other main learning that we've, or one of the new things that my brother and I are experimenting with, is this idea that all software engineers working on new projects should be all in the same code base. This is, I think, a little bit debatable to some extent, but the main reason why we enjoy it, or why we're trying to test this out, is the fact that if you have 1 or 2 engineers, one guy's working on React and Node, and the other guy's in Go, nobody's actually cleaning the garden. The only person that's cleaning the garden is that moment on Saturday morning when you don't want to work on the current features. And so what we see with Golang is there's an interesting opportunity moving forward where you can both have back-end developers and front-end developers working the same code base, or majority of the same code base, all working together. And this, from our perspective, helps create more repeatable patterns, but common patterns that can be shared for onboarding new engineers. This is a major hurdle as you're trying to grow and you want to add a new engineer to your engineering team. You have to onboard them, and it could be anywhere from a few weeks to a few months. And if you can onboard them on a common platform that every engineer has a good understanding with, then that makes that engineer, the likelihood that they'll be productive and efficient much higher, which is pretty rad. So what you guys have all heard of the concept build, learn, and iterate. And so what we're kind of doing is a little bit different, which is generally you can start from scratch and you can do the build, learn, iterate process, but ultimately you're still repeating the process. And so what we're trying to focus in on as we build these startups and these SaaS-based product offerings, how do we start running faster? So instead of starting from scratch and building out our service offering, and then going and building out deployment, then building out metrics, and then building out the marketing stack, all of these things are part of the build, learn, iterate process. And so then there's got to be a better way that we can just develop the business logic and then start running as soon as we're done with the business logic. And that's what Luke and I are spending our energy on, to try to figure out how do we validate and how do we make this work. So project setup. We're big believers in AWS as our deployment. It is expensive, but from our perspective, if you are developing it using Docker containers, then you're still system agnostic. And if you do need to move off, then that's totally fine. But at the beginning, most startups have lack of time and lack of resources. And so anything that you can do to get your product to market faster makes a huge improvement. And we feel that AWS is a critical component for making that happen. And then every service has some sort of persistence layer. We're using MySQL and Redis. And then from there, application platforms. We're writing everything in Go.
Then the fun part, our UI UX experience is being powered by Bootstrap and jQuery. And where we're focused in, and I think a lot of it comes down to projects that you're working on. And some of the projects are very consumer driven. And those consumer driven applications, their value is about making things beautiful and perfect. Where my brother and I enjoy spending our time is on the B2B type product offerings. And for us, a lot of the challenges we're solving, they're business problem challenges, and they're back-end service challenges. And the front end layer is really being the visual side of things. And so we're trying to take advantage of Golang being a scalable web app or scalable software development language, and then start with something simple with jQuery and Bootstrap, which provides 80% of the user experience. And then we have some other stuff going on. We have project management with Monday.com. It's freaking great if you haven't checked it out. And then continuous deployment with GitLab. The previous speaker mentioned Circle CI. We're just using GitLab mainly because they have an enterprise offering as you move down the road. So our tech stack. So what are we coding in? We're using Golang. We're using HTML, basic HTML with Go templates that are nested. As I mentioned a few moments ago, MySQL and Docker. And then we're doing Devops. So with AWS, mainly powered by GitLab. And the cool thing that we're doing in our part of our development strategy is we have a development environment. And then as we develop and push code into the continuous deployment pipeline, everything gets pushed automatically to our staging environment. And then from there, we get a chance to review the staging environment. And if everything passes and it meets expectations, then we can manually push it to production. We're working on, at some point, there's the idea behind continuous integration deployment is code automatically gets pushed. So we're working on getting there still. And hopefully we'll be there soon.
I'll take this one. So yeah, Lee's been heads down trying to figure out these repeatable patterns, and I've been trying to help him figure out the repeatable patterns in this guy. So we were trying to put this to a personal challenge, which was, we have 2 free weeks. Well, we created 2 free weeks, I guess. And can we actually build a SaaS startup from ground zero in 2 weeks and be able to have an MVP that not is just Goldilocks, which is what design sprints are all about, but something that will actually grow and scale. And the reason for that is, like, if we were to create a Goldilocks prototype over here on the far left, and we rewrite it, and we have to rewrite 2 times the business logic, and we would have lost about 2+ weeks. And so you have to figure out how you can, we're trying to figure out how we can do that scalably. And so building MVPs should be fast. Previously,
hang on, sorry, we're sharing the wrong screen on Zoom.
Quick, run and get your coffee. Is it ready yet, Jeff?
No.
Would you like us to start over? I'm talking really fast right
now. Is that the right one?
Yeah.
Can somebody somewhere give us a shout out?
That works.
Is that the right one?
That works.
Juneau, Fairbanks.
Okay, yeah. I think we're good.
Awesome. Yeah, so once we have this MVP, previously with LegalVerse, it took us about 6 months, probably about 3 working on it full time, or this guy with Jeff. And it's how do we actually increase the velocity of building these SaaS startups from the beginning. And so once we get started, and so there's 2 things that so Thursday night, we're like, hey, let's do this personal challenge. And there's 2 things that begin to happen. One, it's the idea phase, and we got to figure out, well, what's the market, who are we going to sell to, what's our hypothesis, and we actually got to start building some UX mocks. Meanwhile, backend developer, the builder, is trying to figure out, well, what should our system architecture be? We need some AWS accounts. We need do we need a database? Do we need caching? And starting to get that framework set up, get our AWS account set up. And meanwhile, while the backend stuff is all getting created, I'm working on the front end side to create these UX mocks. And so we did this originally with LegalVerse. And this is UX Pen, and so I think there's about 50 some odd different screens that kind of just show the proposed functionality, and then we would have a conversation with the other engineers on the team or anybody else on the team, also any other partners, and hopefully at some point we get to show this to a client before we're done doing our sprint. And so this was a simple procedure, and so, well, real quick, what we worked on for this SaaS startup was software as a service to automate standardized operating procedures. So a lot of times those things are done manually and they're done on paper. And so how do you do that electronically and have some workflow to support that? And so this is showing a standardized operating procedure for a fire system. And then here's just a list of some various procedures that we mocked up. And once we get a decent amount of these done, we, meanwhile, Lee's working on thinking about what are we actually going to need to build on the back end. And so we come up with what's included in our MVP. We throw it in Monday, and we start to get down to business.
So for us, I think one of the main or the fun discussions we've had at our previous company is this idea of product versus engineering. Luke and I's approach is product and engineering is integrated and collaborative. And so what we've basically done is we've taken the UX mocks and we pipe the UX mocks into a database schema rather than the reverse, which is let's define our database schema and then figure out what it should look like. And so our database schema is being developed as we're figuring out what should the user experience look like, how should the data flow from user signing up to user interacting with the specific features. And so then the other interesting thing about most of these apps in our previous experience is that there are a ton of database tables. Most of the time when you're working on a smaller project with one or two, so you have the opportunity to do everything your own way, potentially. But as soon as you kind of get beyond one or two or three database tables, it's about repeatable patterns at that point. And so with LegalVerse, there's 29 database tables. With Kenai Space, there's 30. API endpoints, there's so many you can't manage by yourself on a current day. The number of services and plenty of hours engineering. So what does this mean? Well, we've tried this out multiple times to figure out how can we actually do this. The first one, for our first attempt, starting with building a product, was let's define all of our stuff in SQL. Let's use CodeGen to take those database schemas and then pipe them into protobuf files. And then once we have the protobuf files, then we can actually pipe those into creating a data models and the API or the data layer rather. That's great, but what we ended up with at the end of the day was CodeGen was generating us 4 files per table. And it sounds fine, but when you have 30 database tables and then you have 4 files per table, your documentation is A, huge, and then B, if you actually want to look through the code, you're trying to scour 4 different locations for answers. So our second attempt was, we can generate the SQL from the protobuf definitions. Why don't we just toss everything in protobuf and then we'll auto-generate the schemas. It was great, but there's 2 main issues with this. One, we still had to write a custom parser to parse out. Typically what we found is as we define our database schema, we like to define mock data or test data with all of our data structures that we're defining. And so we still had to write a custom parser to parse the protobuf files so that way we could take this mock data and auto-generate our database structs. So A, we had to write a custom parser, and then B, so we still ended up with 3 files per table because we had the protobuf definition, and then we still had the data model, and then the test file for the model. So it was great, but still one step too many. And so one of the things that we're still trying to figure out is how can we just reduce the friction and the overhead for individuals coming in to work on the project to get started and learn about everything as fast as they can. And so what we're currently experimenting with is defining everything in the struct, including the test data. And from there, then we're generating the schema from that, and then we're also auto-generating the data layer. And the cool thing that this has done is it's actually brought us down to two files. We have the database definition, and then we have any custom tests beyond what we auto-generate from our from the definition of the struct. And then, so this is a good example of one of our definitions for a user. We're just using tags on each one of our variable types on a Golang struct. And we are using GORM. GORM is they like to call themselves a fully featured ORM. Mainly, we'll dive down into our decision in a few moments on why we chose GORM. And then, but you can object relation management, and so it's a framework that enables typically interacts with a database and manages relationships between data entities. So what have we done? Well, what we like to think that where we've spent our effort in doing is we've been developing a productivity toolkit for Golang, which is it's a collection of Golang libraries to help us be more efficient in developing new projects from ground zero. It's a thin layer between the requests coming in, whether they're SQS messages or they're actual web requests, and the business logic. We have a bunch of built-in routers, middlewares for responding to the requests, which make adding additional logic extensible. And at the end of and then including focused on serverless deployment on AWS. So serverless is the concept of no longer specifically targeting deploying to a Ubuntu instance or a CentOS instance. We're actually taking all of our code and packaging it up as a Docker container, which is essentially an image of the code. And we're shipping that off to Amazon. And then Amazon is like, great, this has all the instructions for me to run. I will start this image and let it go. And so what the cool thing about this is now us as software engineers, we have the power to deploy our services anywhere from the code itself, rather than having to actually think about what are the resources, and then we have to plan ahead to provision the resources. So it's a serverless deployment. It's something new that's going on. AWS is pushing it pretty hard. Some of the other cloud frameworks are working on it as well. But if you haven't heard of it, you should go Google it. It's pretty darn cool. And then, so what the cool thing with our productivity toolkit is we think that its focus is to help with achieving RAD, which is rapid application development. And so it's minimal effort. We have a bunch of helpers so we don't have to end up redeveloping the wheel. And the main thing being is it's a consistent approach for building these new ideas. And at the end of the day, we're using Golang, so inevitably we have the ability to understand what challenges we need to optimize for, and we can fix those. I'm gonna have to cut some stuff.
Jim's talking faster.
Okay, so AK Trust, that's our productivity toolkit. It has 4 different components. It has code generation, middlewares, presentation, and deployment down here at the end. And one of the main things where we're at right now is this is a fairly new toolkit that we're working on. And the biggest challenge, as I mentioned earlier, is onboarding new engineers. And so one of the things that we are doing is we're trying to align with existing communities out there to, one, most Golang engineers are opinionated at some point, and which is absolutely awesome. But the hardest thing is actually to decide on something. And so our approach currently is we are, for at least for 2 of our main challenges, is we've adopted 2 relatively we have implemented 2 relatively highly adopted projects out there, one for our data layer and then another one for our displaying and building of our web apps, in order to at least establish a benchmark. These are a new set of applications that we're developing, and so we can hypothesize what our bottlenecks will be, but we have no idea until we launch. And so Now we get the opportunity to understand from these existing implementations, and then from there we can figure out what is the next better step. Should we roll our own? Is there somebody else who has solved a similar problem and has already addressed this? And so we're excited about trying to figure out taking what we've currently implemented and then understanding how can we learn and improve what we already have. And so the first one we're using is GORM. It's an ORM. It provides our data layer and it interacts with our API. And so one of the things that we are doing is we're using CodeGen to generate our entire data layer from our data model definitions. And so what we believe is that this enables us, if we do want to swap it out or write something our own, at the end of the day, we still have the opportunity to do this. And then we're using Echo, which is a lightweight web framework that they focus in on building RESTful APIs. So which means they basically, their presentation layer is relatively minimal. And we love that. And so it's, and the base that we're using nested templates with the standard HTML template package. And then we've added a bunch of helper functions as we're rendering these packages to just really expose information in a helpful and meaningful manner.
And so this is the lean startup approach, and so you probably have seen it a lot here in Alaska with, but here on the left, it's design thinking in the red. In the middle, you got your lean UX, and then the agile development is there in the middle. And what we're trying to, with this toolkit and what we're trying to experiment with is how do we do the red part faster, and also how does that lead us into doing this blue squirrely part much faster with very minimal resources, because at the end of the day, we are a small developer community up here in Alaska. And if we can figure out how to do this more efficiently, we can hopefully help other engineers up here and other startups be more successful with limited resources. And so there's this idea of builders and painters. And so obviously this guy's the builder, he talks about tech a little too much. And then I'm the painter, basically. And what that comes down to is if we can take that lean startup process and are able to actually do it more repeatably, hopefully we can increase the velocity of the companies that we're helping, and hopefully other people that use AK Trust at the same time. Okay, you know this one. Yeah, and so we so let's go back to the story. We spent 10 days coding away. We have video of it every day that we haven't finished editing yet. And one of my favorite quotes is, "The coffee is like sludge." Maybe that's your trick for staying up so late. So yeah, at some point we'll produce a video of our experience. But the cool thing, is that by the end of 2 weeks, we had our whole continuous deployment pipeline already done, as we were leveraging the scripts that we originally wrote for Legalverse, and now and then at the same time, we made quite a bit of improvements for both projects. And so you can see here, we have a chain deployment process, and this is all using Docker, and we're using Docker, and then we're also statically compiling our binaries. So the Docker containers that we do ship to prod, all we're doing is we're basically uploading an image of the code, and there's no OS overhead. So most of the time, even if you're using a Docker container and you're using Ubuntu, it's 150 megs or something like that. Our Docker containers that we're shipping up are anywhere between 5 and 15 megs. It depends on how many JavaScript files this guy wants to include. So yeah, at the end of 2 weeks, this is all the stuff we set out to do, and it was all green and pretty cool. So the future of AK Trust. The next few things that we're working on is one, auto generation of API documentation. Everything's there, just got to make it happen. Data layer caching. This is one of the trickier ones. Most ORMs don't actually do it because it's so hard. As soon as you actually write a custom SQL query to do a batch update, your data layer caching is invalid and you can have stale data. So that one should be a tricky one to deal with, but we're excited because that's the main challenge for pushing us over to be able to do global deployments. Multi-language support. This is, I think, fun.
we had, on our first project we ever developed, we had multiple languages. And our second one, for some reason, we didn't add the in at the beginning, and then it became a relatively big burden to pull off. But we're super excited about this because if everything is in the same repo, all of our definitions for the strings that are getting translated are available in a single repo. We don't have to have an additional API to do the translation on the front end. And then the last one is WebAssembly. It's been talked about a lot, and we hope that that's going to be the catalyst to really start creating some really transformative front-end web experiences.
You should, if anybody wants access to AK Trust, it's not public, but
yeah. Oh, so yeah, AK Trust. It's currently in our GitLab account. It's private. If anybody wants access to it, totally welcome. Would love to give you access. We're not ready yet to make it publicly available, but totally would enjoy anybody's feedback or collaborate on the project, or even help deploy it on existing project. Bradley, before he started working for QuickCup, I worked with him 2 days, I think, and we got his existing website with CI/CD for a single HTML page, but some of the same scripts I worked with Bradley. So anybody else that wants to take advantage of some of this stuff, totally love sharing that. And then the last main point is building an app versus a business. Building an app is still time consuming, but it's not all inclusive of everything else that has to get done. You still have to have a go-to-market strategy. You still have to have a sales deck. You have to have support documentation, which is different than code documentation. You gotta have brand identity, you gotta have an actual sales website, and then you have all the lovely infrastructure and web apps, and you have legal, and then the team. And so all of this stuff, you can do great stuff in 2 weeks and you can get something great, but inevitably, you still gotta figure out who are the people you wanna work with and how can you actually sell it. So just because you have an idea and you can build it, you still gotta think about the other stuff. And so I think that's the exciting part that provides learning opportunities for all of us. Other than that, thank you. Next time we'll slow it down or watch the recording at 0.75.
So before you guys get too comfortable and stop talking, Lee and Lucas, there is actually one more award, which is the fake news award. So some of the people up front already know this story, but at one point, Lee and Lucas, you guys have to tell the story, but I'm gonna give the gist. They almost got raided by the FBI. So this article got published in Wired in 2007 about them getting raided, and they're gonna tell you the story.
Yeah. That's how we got started.
Yeah, this is, I guess, a year and a half after we got started actually making money online. So yeah,
I'll tell the beginning.
Oh, yeah. So my brother and I, we went to college. We spent a lot of time trying to develop a project that inevitably we got burned out on and went nowhere. This guy came over to our college dorm room and he's like, hey, you guys have lots of videos, let's put them online. We're like, you're crazy. So my brother, who's not a programmer, actually downloaded some PHP code, put it on a server, and put up all the videos. And then, like, end of the week, we had 1,000 people visiting the day. We're like, this is crazy. You're God. Let's turn this into a business. Not quite like that. So we started basically taking these websites and figuring out how do we monetize them, and how do we monetize them. Using CPC with Google AdWords and YPN back in the day.
$30 on eBay.
Yeah, well, yeah, first banner ad was $30 on eBay. Anyways, we started buying undervalued websites on SitePoint. And one of the websites we bought was AlbumBase. AlbumBase was a link sharing website, so individuals would upload links to Rapid Share and Mega Upload, and we would organize everybody's links to illegal content. But since we were hosting any illegal content, we were like, well, that sounds fine with us. We didn't have any lawyers or anything, so made business sense at the beginning. We all learn.
anyways, we were down at a conference in San Francisco, or no, New York?
It was New York.
We were down at a conference in New York. You can take away the rest of the story.
So, yeah, so one, this website was, I believe it was like number 25 on Alexa. So if you know Alexa, like Google's like #1 and Amazon's probably #2 these days. And number 25, like you're bigger than most porn websites at that point, which is mayhem. And we were running it out of our dorm room, and all of a sudden, Wired Magazine at 10 a.m. while we're in New York is like, the headquarters of Album Base gets raided by the FBI and RIAA, and we're like, oh shit, that's our dorm room. And so we called our friends, and we're like, is there anybody suspicious running around our dorm room or in the dorm area? Like, no, all's good. And so it turns out it was just fake news at the end of the day. But we shut the website down cold turkey because we wanted to finish college. And we didn't want to get raided by the FBI or the RIAA. So,
We did not get arrested, guys.
we did not get arrested. Tech is fun. That's why we do it.
Any questions on building a SaaS business in 2 weeks or not getting arrested by the FBI? All right, guys, this is super fun. Sorry we ran late. I think a few people snuck out early, but they missed out on a great story. So I'll see you guys in 4 to 6 weeks. Thanks for coming.
Teach you to talk to Jeff when you drop.
Yeah.